let me go to our next speaker then. And, uh, and our next speaker is, let me see if I forget now the order in my excitement, but our next speaker is, yes, Attorney Francis. My team knows him as Attorney Kiko. And when we were looking for a resource person for this from the Philippines, I like the way my team described Attorney Kiko as a very passionate lawyer working with the POEA and flashing what was called the handbook for migrant workers as if it was the tool that every migrant worker must have. And he was proudly flashing it to a group of civil society and other government officials and things like that. Attorney Kiko, you have done work on this, you are doing work on this, and Philippines is always cited as the example par excellence. We'll have two Filipino speakers who I've just called on, Noel and Angie, who will have who will share from a civil society kind of perspective. But I'd like your perspective from the government. Do you think you all are doing enough? Do you think your workers go really as empowered as they should be? And do you think all the information that is relevant to them, like our Mohammed said, in terms of protection and empowerment, is they are equipped with this so that when they are in that experience, they know what to do, they know how to respond, they are in the right zone. Attorney Kiko, over to you.
All right. Yes. Thank you, William. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
All right. Yes. I actually wish that I could be flashing the OFW handbook right now, but since the pandemic, we're still in quarantine here over in Manila, in the Philippines. So it's stuck in the press. So we're currently doing the finalization for the press work right now. We just had our bid for the English version of the handbook, and afterwards would do the Filipino, the localized version of the handbook. And if budget allows it, would hopefully be able to upload it by the end of the year or by early next year to something that would be able to be accessed online. So at least that's the bit of an update on the handbook. Now, going to your initial question of whether or not the Philippines is doing enough in terms of in terms of objective three of providing accurate and timely information, I'd have to say the information has always been there. Okay, the information has always been there. Have we been doing enough to reach out and to, at the very least, as we say in the academy, to bring the knowledge to the recipient of that knowledge, or to bring the information to the end user that is that intends to that is intended to actually be using that kind of information. Coming from government, I would have to respond with a calculated no. Okay, I'd have to say no because even though for a fact that we have the policies, and as already been compared and has already been mentioned by the previous speakers, we do have quite a good framework regarding the regarding migration, and in particular migrant labor and migrant work. We in government, in particular, at least the current administration and the team that I'm working with right now, we are constantly reminded that what we are doing is not enough, and there is always room for improvement. Okay, we could always aim for something better. Okay, we could always aim for something better, and complacency complacency shouldn't be part of it. Okay, because just as we thought that there might be that we might have distributed enough materials, or that we might have provided enough information out there to our overseas Filipino workers, here comes complainants, here comes some fortuitous or some event such as the global pandemic that we have right now, which is totally unheard of, that comes into play, which all of us would have to redo and to rethink our strategies just to be able to respond to it. So as a response to that one, we do have the policy framework, but in terms of the implementation, there's still room for improvement on how we would be able to implement better in terms of policy and providing accurate and timely information. But as you mentioned earlier, and as part of the brief that was provided to me regarding this discussion, I was given the task of discussing government interventions in terms of providing information. Okay, the role of government in providing information to migrants. In the case of the Philippines, this would mostly be the migrant workers that we have. So I would just want to to give a walkthrough at least to our colleagues from other countries aside from the Philippines, that the Philippines works on a framework, on a legal framework that has both a statutory component, or at least the written law, and that has a regulatory component, or at least how we do or how we actually implement the written statutes, or the written codes, or at least the codification of the law. So in terms of that legal framework, the two-tiered approach, both the statutory and at the same time the regulatory framework, works hand in hand. And why am I saying that it works hand in hand? Of course, we do know for a fact that laws by themselves, even though they are codified, would not be able to serve its purpose without any particular regulatory body, or without any particular implementing agency. Okay, and without any particular implementing agency. As we say in the Philippines, we do have a long list of laws, and we do subscribe and we do adhere to a long list of international conventions and treaties as well, which of course constitutionally under the Constitution of the Philippines forms part of the law of the land. So first things first. The Philippine Framework on Migration basically is one of the anchors of it is, of course, the Migrant Workers Act, Republic Act 100022, which under which basically provides that we only send Filipino workers to, or we only deploy Filipino workers to countries that meet any of the following criteria. First, the receiving country or the destination country should have an existing system of labor laws. Second, the destination country should, or if they don't have an existing codification of labor laws, the destination country must accede, or at least must be a party signatory to a multilateral labor agreement. Or third, if they neither have a codification of their own labor laws, they are not a party to any multilateral labor agreement, they must be amenable, or they must enter into a bilateral labor agreement with the Philippines. Of course, given that wide net, or at least that wide ambit of qualification, we basically send to almost all countries in the world, almost all countries of destination. Name it, more probably than not, there is a Filipino worker that would be sent to that country. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we do not, as a matter of policy, suspend the sending of migrant workers. We do actually, by a mere governing board resolution and in consultation with the Department of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we are able to suspend the sending of migrant workers to countries of destination which we deem, which by sending migrant workers or Filipino migrant workers to these countries would, we do suspend sending them to those destination countries if we deem that national interest would be put at risk, and at the same time if public welfare is also put at risk. So we do, we have suspended in the past. I wouldn't be naming the countries in the interest of diplomacy. I wouldn't be naming the countries, but I'm sure you are very much aware that in the past 2 or 3 years we have suspended the sending of migrant workers to particular destination countries, even though some of these destination countries are actually part of the top destination countries where we do send out our migrant workers. So that's basically the framework of how we do the how we send out, or at least that basically governs inter-country, or at least the country-to-country approach when it comes to labor migration. But of course, in relation to the Global Compact for Migration, at least to Objective 3, what we have basically is a very comprehensive system of information. Of course, a while ago it was already introduced to us. CIOP was already introduced to us. Comprehensive information and orientation program has already been introduced to us. The Philippines has been at the forefront of applying it, at least as part of the Abu Dhabi dialogues. We've been at the forefront of at least using this framework. But on top of that, and as already been mentioned during when I was introduced, we're basically working on a codification of the pre-employment, employment, and the post-employment phase of labor migration into a compact. As one of the good senators who authored the law would want to say, yung manipis lang, that's the Filipino term for just the thinnest, or at least the most compact, or at least the least, or at least it's something that's easy to read and something that would be that any migrant worker would be able to carry in their pockets. And when we were actually discussing this with the Congressional Oversight Committee for the OFW Handbook, or the Overseas Filipino Workers Handbook, which is governed by Republic Act 11227, we were actually telling them, Your Honors, honorable senators, honorable congressmen, that's a very tough order. That's a very difficult. That's a very difficult order given to us, considering that as I've mentioned earlier, we do have a very comprehensive information system, and at least the laws, the framework, the rights and responsibilities framework of migrant workers from the Philippines is actually very comprehensive. On top of that, that same law, the OFW Handbook Act, and in terms of providing accurate and timely information to all migrant workers that would be sent out of the country, would need to be divided into the two main classifications of migrant workers that we have: the land-based and the sea-based. The Philippines, as a sending country, actually has the most number of seafarers that we do send out. And there is a wide distinction as to the types of rights and responsibilities that a seafarer would have as compared to a typical land-based worker. Okay, as a typical land-based worker, and of course, it's quite obvious. Geographically, a seafarer would be reporting to a ship that docks from port to port, that would have different jurisdictional requirements, and that of course would have different types of laws that would be applicable to them. Whereas a land-based worker would be deployed to a country of destination, say for example to Kuwait, and they would only be staying in Kuwait. If they would be deployed, say for example to the UAE, they would only be staying in the UAE. So we would be able to pattern, and we would be able to fit the information that we'd be able to give them to that particular country only. Aside from the type of worker, the country of destination, we are also required to provide information to migrant workers that would fit, or at the very least that would be in a language that would be easily understood by that particular migrant worker. From the recent discussion that we had, we were informed, of course, that in Kuwait, they're giving out handbooks. IOM in particular is giving out handbooks, and some of the NGOs are giving out handbooks in various languages. And you may most of you would think that most of the migrant workers from the Philippines, and it still remains to be one of the advantages of actually getting migrant workers from the Philippines, would be able to converse, or at least would be able to understand basic English. English is a universal language. Unfortunately, the legal framework that we have is not in basic English. It is in a highly technical language that even us who are already trained in the legal profession who are already lawyers would sometimes have a difficulty in understanding. So we need to translate that into something that would be easily understood by the migrant worker. And we are not only talking about the information that would be coming from the sending country, such as the Philippines. We're also talking about information about the destination country in such a language that would be easily understood by the migrant worker. Okay, by the migrant worker. Okay, so we are required to publish in English, in the major languages of the Philippines, so as to cater to all, or at the very least to a majority of the migrant workers that we are sending out, or at least that we are sending from the Philippines. On top of that, of course, we do have the regular orientation seminars or the orientation programs that we conduct. Aside from the migrant workers handbook or the OFW handbook, we do have, of course, the pre-employment orientation seminar, the pre-departure orientation seminar, the post, or at least the post-arrival, or at least upon arrival at the destination country, they would have again another type of seminar hosted by the labor office in that destination country. So you could just imagine the comprehensiveness of the information. But going back again to William's question a while ago, is it enough? I would have to say, and this is at the very least to conclude this round of my discussion with you. I don't think it's enough, because even though it is out there, even though we are able to provide that information, there are still those who would be encountering problems in the destination countries. Okay, so long as there would be migrant workers who would be encountering problems in the destination countries, and then I would dare say that it is not enough. Okay, we should be doing more. Okay, we should be doing more, and we should be giving more in terms of accurate and timely information for them. So thank you.
Perfect.
That would be all for this round.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being so candid, so straightforward in saying we are not doing enough. Because we hear always about how much the Philippines is doing, and then to hear this from you that we are not doing enough is a nice honest kind of expression of yes, there needs to be a lot more. I also find it very interesting of how you talked about the 5 conditions that you have for deploying of migrant workers, but I also know how the Philippine government has been able to deploy and get around the 5 conditions in some way, so that you are still deploying, and even if there is suspension, the suspension tends to be reactive rather than proactive monitoring and suspension kind of thing. But you can pick that up in the next round. But I also like, and I've always put it like this, when nobody was doing pre-departure, the Philippines gave the world pre-departure. When everybody was doing pre-departure, the Philippines gave the world pre-employment. When everybody started pre-employment, the Philippines started post-arrival.
Yes.
Now people are talking about post-arrival. I'm wondering what the Philippines will think of next. So
we're already talking about reintegration.
Reintegration.
Return to country orientations.
So I'd like to hear your comments on that.